First of all, I wanted to ask you one thing, Ante, and is you've been lucky enough to race in F1 for quite a long time, and you've been able to live all this change of regulation, different cycle, etc. And you've seen all the steps. How was it for you as a driver to adapt to this last step?
The privilege of being part of a group that is fighting for world championships and has the potential to turn it into success at the end of the season. That's what everyone in the team came into the sport to try and do.
Well, hello and welcome to another episode of the new Silver Arrows radio show from here in Brackley, where we have Deputy Team Principal Bradley Lord and Deputy Technical Director Simone Resta.
Hi,
welcome,
everyone.
gentlemen.
Thank you very much. Great to be here.
So we're going to be looking at the last two races, Spa and Budapest. I was watching Spa from my sofa at home, enjoying the weekend, and I was actually working for Sky F1 at Budapest, so I got to see it from the journalistic point of view, taking in everyone's performances, but it's always interesting to speak to the people that they're on the ground, tunnel visioned on the team's perspective. So Bradley, let's start with you. How's it been the last two Grand Prix?
Yeah, two contrasting Grand Prix, and I think neither of them completely smooth. Obviously, we came out of Spa with a win for Kimi, but a really difficult weekend for George, who was on the back foot all the way through that weekend, and it took us a while to dig through the data, the telemetry, the configurations of the car to really understand what was holding him back in qualifying. And then obviously he was the victim of a turn 5 incident on lap 1 that put him out of the race completely, and ultimately was the biggest cause of lost points over those two races. Into Budapest, more challenging weekend. First time probably that we've seen ourselves not as the quickest car across the race weekend on race pace as well. It was very tight with McLaren in Miami. And then in Budapest, they brought a decent upgrade package and looked to have taken a step forward. And then obviously, again, unfortunately for George, a problem at the start that resulted in him going into anti-stall. I think he started P6. He was P21 and the last car that had started from the grid by the time he exited turn 1. But then he put in a great recovery drive, and Kimi from P6 on lap 1 was able to make it at least back to the podium. P2 could have been possible, but P3 was a really solid recovery and actually a good day for his championship picture relative to Lewis in second.
Yeah, race pace definitely looked stronger than the quali pace in Hungary. But Simone, Bradley mentioned McLaren there. If we look at the teams that seems like there are top four teams really. Mercedes obviously one of them, and then you've got, in my opinion, you've got McLaren, Ferrari, and Red Bull, who are there or thereabouts. But it seems like it's boiling down to the top four teams. Did you expect it to be that way this year in a brand new set of regulations?
Yes, we were broadly expecting that. Clearly, you only start a season with question marks about potential other contenders, but actually it panned out as we expected. And it's great to see these teams developing perhaps on a very slightly different development scenario with different upgrades at different time, etc. And it's nice to see some fluctuation of performance, which I guess is making the racing quite more interesting.
And it's probably worth saying, I mean, brand new set of regulations. Last time we saw new PE regs come in 2014, the Mercedes team that I was part of then, you were at a different team at that time. Simone was definitely the class of the field, and you could see that all the way through the customer teams as well. Whereas the four teams you mentioned, and there's 3 different power units in there. One of them is a brand new power unit this year as well, and that's really impressive to see the standard that is being delivered to across the whole package, not just on the chassis side in terms of the level of competitiveness. And if we look, it's only 3 races ago that we're in Austria, and Max was hounding George for the win right down to the final laps. And so they've, Red Bull, they've also had some standout performances, even if they've not been the most regular challenger to our different race weekends and success on those race weekends.
So Spa seemed to be a more straightforward race for Mercedes, where the speed was there in qualifying, the speed was certainly there in the race. Yes, you mentioned, Bradley, that George was unlucky in turn 5, and I think even with the problems that he had technically on the run up towards Le Combe at turn 5 and the clash with Lewis, on another day in the same scenario, they might have survived it, and he would have gone on to, I don't know where he could have finished, but probably, let's say, challenging a podium at least.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
So speed has definitely been there in Spa. For me, the real interesting one was Budapest. So McLaren come over with the upgrades. Did you see anything, Simone, from your side, from a technical point of view, what they brought to their car that would... Basically what I'm trying to get to, was it more Lando, or was it really the upgrades from McLaren that gave this performance in Budapest?
I mean, for sure it's a sizable update, and it must have had an impact in their performance. But also, if you look at the gap between their two cars, is significant as well. So we have seen, in general, McLaren as a team that has performed well in many occasions this year, with a bit of up and down between the two drivers in terms of who is the fastest one. And we have seen some strong performance from Norris already a few times this year. And maybe he was in a very good place with the car and the setup in this condition and tire management, and he executed very well. So I think it's probably a combination of both aspects. We are very lucky we got a very strong pair of drivers, both of them very quick, both of them pole sitters this year, both of them race winners this year, just in half a season. And we have really had both of them really in different races, in different days, on their top performance, really delivering great result for a team. And I think it's really great asset for us, and we really, this combination of drivers that will put themselves always the bar higher, competing with themselves, and ultimately they deliver a higher result for the team. I think it's really great to have both of them on board and sharing this journey with us.
Yeah, and I think seeing how they're working together as well, we've obviously, as a team, had times when it's been a much more tense situation between teammates, and actually the way in which George and Kimi are, working together, they're obviously looking to do their best, and they know each other. As always in F1, your teammate is your first rival, but that competition is a really healthy one, and there's no games being played, there's no things being hidden, there's simply a desire to make the most of the opportunity the team offers to do the best possible job for their Drivers' Championship, but first and foremost for the sort of Constructors' Championship as well. It
was really impressive, actually, working with George in the sim at the end of last year. Actually, that's when this season really began in terms of HPP, the Mercedes power unit element, which obviously was it's 50% of your power from the battery this year. So it was a huge demand on everyone to understand it. It was a whole new world. And George was mightily impressive in getting everyone around and understanding that he got on top of these regulations, I think, very quickly. I was in there pounding around doing the very early stages at the end of last year while they were still focused on the championship in 25. But it was so impressive how quickly he got his head around it.
Yeah. First of all, I wanted to ask you one thing, Ante, and is you've been lucky enough to race in F1 for quite a long time, and then you were even more lucky, say, to continue your career on the simulator, running this car in the deal, in the virtual world, etc. And you've been able to live all these change of regulation, different cycle, etc. And you've seen all the steps. How was it for you as a driver to adapt to this last step? How did you felt? How was it? Was it easy for you to understand it and learn it and manage it, or how have you felt the complexity of this regulation?
Well, there's one vital step in all of that was missing, is my sports car career. And very luckily, I drove hybrid vehicles in motor racing before Formula One adopted that. So I already in 2012 was driving in hybrid sports cars. And then in 2014, it came along, kind of like a light version, came along in Formula One. So when it naturally progressed to where we are now with this almost 50-50 split, that actually is much more like my old sports car knowledge of how the system used to work. So all of this super clipping, where we have the electric motor kicking in at the end of the straight and pulling back of electric energy from the internal combustion engine, I had exactly the same amount of. It wasn't called super clipping back in those days, but I was completely comfortable and at ease with super clip, the process of what super clipping was. So it put me in such good stead for this new set of regulations. And then when the race drivers came in January, and I'd done all the work in the sim at the tail end of last year, it was great fun to go through with them the added importance of electrical power this year. So that's how I was more familiar with it. And that's why when I see these problems happening on track, that I can really empathize with what the drivers are going through, because a lot of it, unfortunately, does seem to be a little bit out of their control. And I think the fans really struggle to understand this. Like, I see some comments saying that it's AI controlling controlling the what's under the right foot of the driver. But I don't know if you wanted to clear that up, Simone.
Yes, I suppose there's a bit of, let's say, more softer in the way that we have to manage the PU for all these quite intricate, let's say, energy management rules. But ultimately, when you observe the race and the car from the inside the box, but also from the TV, it's quite of a different view, and I really enjoy seeing in TV. It's a very live racing. There's a lot of overtaking. There's a lot of tactics about how you deploy the energy, when is the best time to use it or to save it. Also looking in the loop and the feedback about what the other is doing as well, for example. So it's a very tactical way of racing, which I find it quite interesting. I think is adding quite another dimension into the show in terms of how they deal with that. And it's not about always using the energy in the same way, the power in the same way, etc. But it opens up quite a lot for the driver to really add value into the racing.
And I think there's been a lot of talk about everything that's been lost this year, but not necessarily about what's been gained. So there's certainly been some compromises in qualifying, and some of the bigger, more famous flat-out corners in qualifying, they're going to be addressed with what's coming for 2027 and 2028 in terms of the rebalancing, I guess, between electrical and combustion power.
It's those, I was just going to chip in, it's those energy-reliant circuits where you're flat out nearly all the time. They've become kind of like the Achilles heel of this set of regulations that needs addressing, and it will be.
And it's being addressed, and I think that's, that argument is no longer up for debate in terms of the people's views of it and opinions. But equally, if we look at Spa, we look at Budapest. In Spa, the top two cars between Kimi and Charles were probably a tenth and a half apart on pure pace. Yet these regulations enabled an overtake for the lead, and ultimately the faster car did win out. If we saw in Budapest as well, we saw that sort of dive down the inside at turn one from Verstappen on Lewis as well. And that was good old fashioned Max Verstappen style overtaking, I guess, down the inside and on the brakes, and in a way that is very, very much Formula One at its best. And
but it looked like pure racing to me.
Yeah,
that turn one moment you mentioned looked more like pure racing, which I think Budapest was always going to serve up. Having done it in the sim before the weekend, you realise with Hungary it's not a power limited track in terms of energy. It's energy rich, so you've always got battery power. Whenever you put your right foot down, it felt like a dragster. You always had this 1,000 horsepower. Every single corner exit, the car felt wild, but brilliant to drive.
Honestly, Ant, I remember all the discussion we've had, let's say, leading into Budapest on Thursday, on Friday, even on Saturday, questioning the capacity of these cars to overtake in Hungary, the fact that you really need to start in a good position in quali, because it's going to be very difficult to overtake, and the risk is to have like trains of cars not be able to really to go through the traffic. We've seen that actually it was easier to overtake, and still with this regulation it gives you the possibility. If you see the race George has done, it has been really fantastic. Like Bradley said before, he started 21st and he was able really to arrive in the toe of a jar at the end of the race, and is showing that there is a lot of potential with this regulation still to understand and exploit, and really is making a very nice racing with a lot of move on the track.
And arguably, I think we missed what would have probably been some of the more exciting overtakes with the way the VSC played out. Kimi had just made his second stop, built a sort of 15 to 20 lap tyre offset. Now that would have made for some pretty strong defending from the cars ahead of him, and some pretty exciting moves, I think, from Kimi, because they wouldn't have been easy overtakes even with that tyre advantage. But seeing him hunting down Leclerc, Hamilton, Verstappen would have been really, really good to see. And unfortunately, I mean, it turned out okay in terms of just making it out ahead of the Ferrari and retaining P3 as Kimi was able to do, or going round and the Ferrari coming out just behind him after that VSC. But yeah, the best bit of the race, I think we actually missed.
Yeah, we were, I think, with my TV hat on, we were robbed of a great crescendo of the race with lots more overtaking. And I kind of, I felt a bit sorry for Kimi that tyre offset that the team and himself had been nicely building to have that, it would have been over 20 laps worth.
It was somewhere between 15 to 20, according to who the car was in front. It would have been really interesting. And you feel for him because every time he's put the effort in to build these tyre offsets, Silverstone was exactly the same. The payoff for the hard work on the old tyres is the chance to do the hunting on the new tyres afterwards. And obviously we had the reliability challenge, the reliability problem with the wheel shield in Silverstone, and then the VSC sort of somewhat neutralised it, and then he was in defense mode against the Ferrari rather than in attack mode.
I wouldn't say probably that VSC is our best friend at the moment.
Not at the moment.
But we've had also Spain, we've had a few other conditions. Hopefully after the shutdown, we'll have some good
And it was
VSC.
on the radio right after the race. Shove came on and just said, right, race strategy from now on, we're going to pick a lap, then wait 2. Because every time we stop, it seems a VSC comes out and sort of neutralises our advantage and hands it to someone else.
Well,
these things go round. These things come back round.
Exactly. I mean, there's getting lucky with a virtual safety car, and then, as it turned out for him in the last, there's being unlucky because that offset that he had created allowed other people just to come in and stay in front of him on track because it's a free pit stop with everyone circulating slowly. It means that you pretty much get a pit stop for free. And then they're back in front of him now with the same age or even newer tyres than what he has.
Softer compound, yeah. And the other quirk in Hungary was it didn't matter whether you had a soft, a medium or a hard tyre on, really. They all basically had the same performance and the same life. Yeah. So we saw that with Verstappen, didn't we, running 30-odd laps on that soft. I'm not sure even they expected that would go to the finish, but it just seemed to go.
The other quirk that happened during the race is that, and I know from a technical side, Simone, that I don't fully understand what happened on circuit, but the blue flag situation with the GPS going down, what actually happened there? Because that created traffic hell for everyone coming up. And you can't blame the drivers that were getting lapped so much because they didn't have the help from their engineers telling them who was coming. But it certainly affected drivers trying to make their way by. What actually happened technically there?
I think they didn't have basically the automatic marshalling system to show the blue flag, and they were struggling to see that, and they were probably more reliant on information from engineers on the radio. It actually made quite exciting some of the moves, and
I think the whole GPS system was slightly playing up as well, wasn't it? So you didn't have even where the engineers were able to say, right, they're within a second and a half, which is the blue flag, what triggers the blue flag. I'm not sure all the deltas and the timings people were seeing were completely accurate. I mean, I remember when I was a kid, you used to watch, I think it was René Arnoux, used to always be called out as the ultimate blocker.
You're showing your age
sitting,
there.
I am. But he was the blocker that would sit there and, leaders would be behind him for lap after lap. And it felt a little bit like that. And I've seen some videos since, and you watch some of the onboards where drivers are going past 5, 6, 7 different light panels that are all flashing blue. So the things are happening, but it just shows how reliant you become on the on steering wheel system and the input from the engineers.
That was an eye opener, really, because so it was the marshal system within the car that the drivers were missing, because I saw plenty of blue panels around the track. Yeah. But when I can't remember who it was at the end of Williams fighting an Aston Martin, and they've got blue lights flashing everywhere, but you're embroiled in the battle with the driver you're directly fighting. So it's quite easy to miss these panels on track. But I guess that your steering wheel that you're always looking at, you won't miss those blue lights there.
And this, I guess, in a way, it also reminds me the situation in quali. Because yes, there was a yellow flag out for Kimi, but there was a delay from him having the signal on his dashboard on the yellow one. And you are a driver, you know how it is. You're there, you're hunting for a pole. You're in the last corner, you're preparing the corner entry, etc. You look at the line, etc. And if you don't have the information straight away from your dashboard, it's quite difficult to be just with the eyes and look everywhere else, because you're really committed to the corner. And I think he didn't help that Kimi as well.
Yeah, he had that panel on the left, didn't he, on the way into 14, but the eye line is going right already towards the 8.
I reviewed that one, and I felt like I really didn't know how the stewards were going to take that, because I knew it was very close. But also, he's probably looking at the car, the car in the middle of the road. As soon as he's, like you say, he's looking to the right, and what's gone on in his peripheral vision of the yellow just popping up, might have missed it. Let's give him benefit of the doubt. But even if he didn't miss it, he was off throttle earlier than, I don't know if you remember seeing the data, was it something like 15
he came off throttle earlier and then sort of coasted into the corner. But the stewards ultimately looked at the mini sectors, determined that unlike in Austria where he completely lifted and backed off the lap, this time he hadn't lifted enough. So I think ultimately it's one to chalk up to the learning experience for a young driver still in F1 and how to exactly calibrate how you handle those situations. But more impressive almost was by Sunday morning, it was like, Kimi's so matter of fact about these things. And it's been something that I think he's shown this year is whether it's the retirement in Silverstone, the retirement in Barcelona, there's obviously emotion and disappointment in the moment, but then his ability to close that chapter and just focus on the next challenge, park everything from, that's happened so far, and his stability and calmness, and then just, right, next one, how can I maximize that, was super impressive. And that was the mindset he took into the race, wasn't it?
And also, to come back to your point about what happened in quali. Yes, like you say, in the mini sector, the delta was small, but actually the unlucky thing is that the previous lap wasn't good enough.
Exactly.
So when setting the reference to judge the second lap, it wasn't good enough. So therefore, in slowing down, you were being compared with a not good enough third sector.
A bad turn 14 previously.
Instead, like Kimi observed just straight after quali, he said, if you look at my FP3, so free practice, higher fuel level, so typically a slower car, then there he was a tenth quicker. So actually, he lifted off, but the fact that he was compared with a slower lap, not an ideal lap, he didn't create a big enough gap to be able then to justify the fact that you lift off. It's a bit of a perfect storm in a way, but it's fine. He was able just to compare well, whatever, let's say.
You weren't comparing apples with apples, basically, is what you're trying to say. Yeah, it was a different
and the stewards kind of recognised it, didn't they? They gave him, it was a 3-place penalty, not a 5. They did recognise there were mitigating circumstances, but it's just one to chalk up to learning.
And having spoken to some of the drivers, I think actually it was with George when he was almost caught out with the Austrian yellow flag, which he reacted to perfectly and by the book. He was saying that even the drivers themselves can't agree on what to do in qualifying with double wave yellows or single yellows. So some of them will say, no, definitely double yellow. It's what we need. Whenever there's a car off in qualifying, just make it a double yellow, then we all know where we're at. And some drivers saying, yeah, but what if we're nowhere near that corner and the double yellow and my lap gets deleted? That's really unfair. So even between the drivers and the steward, they can't actually agree on what the protocol should be.
You don't envy race control or the stewards the job of finding consistency through incidents that each and every one is by its nature different in context, circumstance, apex speed of a corner, amount of track and runoff that's left when you're sort of trying to overtake or not. And I mean, we're as bad, we're as much outraged or happy as all the different fans that are watching as well sometimes, in terms of understanding the consistency of decision making. But equally, we've got a huge asset in the team in Ron Meadows, who's sporting director, who's been doing this for so long and always has a very, very measured, neutral view of right and wrong and responsibility and likelihood of either tackling a penalty that we might feel is unfair, or actually saying no, I think probably we're just take that one on the chin and move on.
So obviously they're the outside external factors that you can't, and most of the time you can't control, but as a team you have to react to them the best you can, and some you win, some you lose. But recently I feel like there have been a lot of little gremlins that can be controlled and monitored by the team. How do you feel about this, Simone? And what can be done to stop these small internal problems happening that are costing the team points?
Well, I think this is as a result of the level being higher and higher in Formula One. There's a lot of competition. You really need to squeeze out everything in every single aspect. And we are lucky we got a lot of experience in the team. We got good processes, good tools. We just have to really keep our relentless effort in just nailing with the right prioritization one by one, nail them and just move forward. And there's a lot to do. Like you say, we left point on the table. We had for many instances, but we are really focused, like I said, in a relentless way. We really determined in nail them one by one and move forward. and that will make us a better team for the future. And we just have to, with calm, determination, nothing emotional, just simply, rationally, just analyze all of them, make sure we got the right fix at the right time, and speed up this process, and just make sure that we bring everything on track. And we'll be a better team after we sort out all of this.
Yeah, and doing it, I think, in a calm way. That's the other real thing. We're coming in to the summer break. Obviously, we're halfway through the year, but we've almost done the easy bit. The tough bit comes after the summer, once the pressure comes, once the races start counting down, once we start doing the big chunks of flyaway races where the race team are away from the factory for a long time, the cars and the componentry are away from the factory. You're trying to introduce upgrades while you're on the other side of the world rather than an hour and a half's flight away and things like that. So all of that brings added challenge, and almost some of what you need to deliver there is not trying to rush everything at a relentless, frenetic pace, but making sure you're doing it in a calm, measured way that minimizes the chances of things going wrong, as well as maximizes, every chance of success. And so those are the conversations that are happening at the minute in terms of when do we bring the performance that's in the wind tunnel or working its way through the factory at the moment. At what races do we introduce those? Where do things come with the Aduo opportunity on the power unit, with the aero upgrades on the chassis as well, and making sure we're pacing that in the right way and not tripping ourselves up by trying to almost overreach too quickly.
So it brings us on to the halfway point of the championship, and 72 points in the leader constructors and 50 points leading the drivers' championship. I think on paper you'd have to say looks pretty good. I know the team would always want more, like every team. But I think a half-term report has to be, like you say, Bradley. It's been a lot of hurdles to get over, but to be in, if someone had told you at the very beginning you'd be in this position without knowing all the backstory, here are the points. I think you'd have to take it. I don't know how you feel going forward, Simone, but
I feel exactly like that. If you look at the journey that the team has lived, and also I've been part of the team now almost for 2 years, and we coming back after some difficult years, and we've been able last year already to take a step, this year another big step, and it wasn't obvious. It's been great. I always like to look at the glass half full, and it's really been great to be here, but we are almost at mid-season, so potentially there's a lot more to come, and we really need to stay focused and just look one race after the other one, etc. Not look at the big picture, not being lost with looking at points, etc. We simply try to squeeze out everything we get in every race, maximize our potential, nail all the problems, sort out the reliability, accelerate as much as we can the updates, but not too much for our legs, and then try to get to the end in a good position. There's a lot still more to come.
And I mean, ultimately, this is as good as Formula One gets. This is, we've had a remarkable start to the season, 8 wins in 11. Yes, we've had some setbacks and some difficulties. Formula One's really tough. It's never going to be without those, but the privilege of being part of a group that is fighting for world championships and has the potential to go and ultimately build on that points lead you mentioned and turn it into success at the end of the season. That's what everyone in the team came into the sport to try and do. So the chance to sort of set yourself that challenge and measure yourself against it is a true privilege, and one that I think everybody is really looking forward to.
Also Bradley, if I guess you share that, but you see every year that you get to a certain point, but then after the shutdown, the pressure starts to build up. It builds up on the ones that start leading, but also on the ones that are following, because they're really trying to catch you. And also on them, the pressure is going to be quite higher. And there's quite a bit of a different game than to the season start, and really showing the resilience and the strength of the team in this condition, because the game is becoming more and more tense, more and more difficult, and you can see who is cracking, who is really building on that, and it's going to be great to see that part of the season after the shutdown.
It's great to hear such positivity within the team, and I look forward to seeing the next round of updates from all the teams, this team in particular, come through, and brings us nicely up to the closing point of this radio show. And thank you, gentlemen. I wish you a very relaxing 2-week or more enforced holiday from the FIA and Formula One. I think we're all going to enjoy it.
One of the best things in Formula One is the summer and the winter shutdowns. Yeah.
Thank you so much, guys. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Ant. And remember, we got Zambor to prepare on the simulator, so let's go back at work now.
Yeah, exactly. You need to get cracking.
I'll get going. Cheers, guys.
Cheers. Thank you.